Chapter 945. The conditions for upgrading the Mansion of the Dead had basically been fulfilled. Ling Shiqi had stirred up the world's disputes with great fanfare in order to collect a large number of souls and turn them into merit. The Northern Wei dynasty had been invaded by the demon race, and the Thunderstorm dynasty had attacked the Starfall dynasty. He had already collected enough merit, so he had tried his best to prevent unnecessary casualties. Now, the Mansion of the Dead was only one step away from upgrading, and that was the head of a Tongxian realm expert. Ling Shiqi had first killed 6 Direction Spirit Sovereign and the other 3 in the Holy City. When the door was about to open, he killed Yimei. Then, he entered the Holy City's secret realm and killed Wuma Yuanjie, Chen Xan, and the 2 Tongxian realm experts who had helped them. A total of 9 people. Now, he was only short of 1 head. There were very few Tongxian realm experts in the world, and there were actually more Tongxian realm experts than Tongxian realm experts. It was a strange sight. Ling Shiqi already had a target for this last head. The only surviving martial spirit region of the 4 saint spirit regions. Not long after Ling Shiqi had brought out the people in the Holy City's secret realm, the secret realm had inexplicably collapsed, and more than half of the people inside had died. Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji had been in the secret realm at that time, but Ling Shiqi did not dare to stay for too long in fear of being discovered by the 4 saints, so he did not specifically kill him. However, the monk could escape, but the temple could not. After Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji left the secret realm, he found out that he was the only one left of the 4 saint spirit regions. This successor of the 4 saints, the master of the spirit region, was greatly frightened. Since someone could easily destroy the other 3 spirit regions, destroying the martial spirit region would naturally be as easy as flipping a hand. Therefore, Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji had moved the resources and disciples of the spirit region as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, just as they had finished preparing, a person had already appeared in the sky above the spirit region. The cold netherworld energy instantly covered the martial spirit region, and some low-level spirit cultivators even died upon contact. Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji knew that this day had come. Without any suspense, Spirit Sovereign Wu Ji's head fell into Ling Shiqi's hands, and his soul was also absorbed into the Mansion of the Dead. The souls of 10 Tongxian realm experts had finally been gathered. Ling Shiqi entered the Mansion of the Dead and summoned the territory system. Mansion of the Dead has met the upgrade requirements. Upgrading the territory will require 2,000 natural days. During this period, the territory will not be able to be used. Do you wish to upgrade? Yes. The Ling Shiqi was prepared to welcome the great changes in Underworld, but strangely, Underworld did not expand this time, and there were no great changes. Just as he was feeling puzzled, he looked towards the sky above the Underworld. With a single thought, he arrived directly above the Underworld's 9 heavens. Unknowingly, a fist-sized mass of black energy had appeared here. 4 words suddenly appeared in Ling Shiqi's mind: world origin. The Underworld actually gave birth to the world's origin. This meant that from this moment onwards, the Underworld had truly become a world of its own. The Underworld. As for the Ling Shiqi, as long as he refines the world's origin, he can become the master of the world. He had always been the founder of Underworld, and also held the title of Lord of Underworld. In Underworld, he had many special abilities. However, compared to the world's origin, the difference was like heaven and earth. Ling Shiqi gently hooked his finger, and the Underworld's origin directly entered his body. At this moment, all the living beings in Underworld knelt on the ground devoutly at the same time. They kowtowed 3 times and 9 times in the direction of Ling Shiqi, welcoming the arrival of their master of the world. What a strange feeling. Ling Shiqi clenched his hands. He seemed to be able to decide the life and death of any living being with just a thought. Just a glance was enough to shatter the void. Then, he flicked his 5 fingers, and 5 rays of light scattered in all directions. In fact, those were not rays of light, but threads of law. Threads of law of the power of the 5 elements. Ling Shiqi flashed to the side of an ancient tree. With a gentle wave, the ancient tree grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, and finally withered and decayed. Every year, the law of time. After he became the master of the underworld, the 3 supreme laws and the 5 elements laws of yin and yang were all at his fingertips. This godlike feeling was intoxicating. However, Ling Shiqi did not lose himself in it. He knew very well that no matter how powerful he was in underworld, he could not bring all of it to the middle element world. After all, these were 2 different worlds. The power of law was completely different. Not only did he want to become the master of underworld, he also wanted to break free from the shackles of the middle element world and strive for supreme power. Although Ling Shiqi could choose to be the master of his world in underworld, underworld was the system's masterpiece. In the end, all of underworld's functions and powers were still dependent on the system. He had decided to be wary of the system a long time ago. All these years, he had been anxious to upgrade underworld, not because he was greedy for the so-called master of the world. Instead, he wanted to use underworld's power to fight against the middle element world, and even transcend this world like the 4 sages pursued. When that time came, underworld or the middle element world would no longer matter. After underworld's upgrade this time, there were no conditions for a second upgrade. This was because underworld had been upgraded to its limit. Although Ling Shiqi could not bring all of his power to the middle element world, he could still use some of it. He had returned to the Starfall continent. He could easily use all of the laws of heaven and earth in this world. Of course, they were not as powerful as they were in underworld. Even so, it had indirectly increased his strength, and not just by a little bit. This gave him more confidence in fighting against the 4 sages in the future. However, what Ling Shiqi did not know was that just as he was beginning to adapt to the power of the 2 worlds, a mysterious figure had arrived in Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region. He looked at Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region, which had been razed to the ground and turned into ruins. His whole body was burning with anger. He was the Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region Lord, who had paid a great price to walk out of the spatial passage. After returning to the Starfall continent, he came here immediately because he had left many things in Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region. If he could take them back, they could help him quickly recover his strength. However, what he saw was the scene in front of him. The Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region that he had built with his own hands, which had been passed down for hundreds of thousands of years, was destroyed. Not only was it destroyed, but it was completely destroyed. All of the disciples were dead. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, they were all being hunted down by the Blood Garment Pavilion's assassins. Moreover, Ling Shiqi had specifically ordered that no traces of the spiritual region could be left behind. Even if they had to dig 3 feet into the ground, they had to destroy everything. Imperial Prestige Spiritual Region Lord formed a hand seal, and the spiritual region suddenly displayed a realistic scene. It was the scene of the spiritual region's destruction. He finally saw clearly that the one who had done it was the old beggar. You're courting death. Chapter 946. In the Western Wilderness King's mansion, several reaching heaven states sat together with a heavy expression. Ling Shiqi said bluntly, "Everyone, I've absorbed 4 dragon veins of the falling star continent. Now I'm a walking dragon vein. Although I don't know how to use the power of the dragon veins, the 4 saints care so much about the dragon veins. When they return to the falling star continent, they will definitely come to snatch the dragon veins." Everyone knew that he had obtained all the dragon veins, but no one cared too much. Otherwise, they would have stood out to stop him from the beginning. What they cared more about was the second half of Ling Shiqi's sentence. The 4 saints would return to the falling star continent sooner or later. Because no one would enter the holy city, the 4 saints would not be able to find pawns to use. The only way was to come out personally. Thinking of this, everyone was a little worried, as if there was a sharp sword hanging over their heads all the time. They did not know when it would fall and take their lives. Ling Shiqi continued, I dare say that the four saints will have to pay a great price to leave that space, and the explosion of the vortex last time will consume a lot of their power. So don't worry too much. Even if the four saints reappear, their strength will be far less than now. We still have the power to fight them. It's not that easy. Gru shook his head. Heaven and Earth Tao Ancestor also said, the four saints have lived for hundreds of thousands of years. No one knows what trump cards they have. Even if their strength is severely weakened, they are not something we can deal with. What you said is reasonable. Ling Shiqi stood up and said, so we must improve our strength as soon as possible. They immediately sighed in tacit understanding. Gru said, it's not that easy. I've been in the reaching heaven state for thousands of years. There's no possibility for me to improve. The 10 sky demons snorted. It's only been thousands of years. Heaven and Earth Tao Ancestor and I didn't make any progress for more than 20,000 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't have entered the holy city so easily. Ling Shiqi smiled mysteriously. If I say that I have a way to improve your strength in a short time, would you believe me? The 10 sky demons subconsciously wanted to say that they didn't believe it, but they immediately remembered that Ling Shiqi had said something similar in the passage. At that time, Ling Shiqi said that he could take them out, and in the end, he really did leave without the four saints knowing. Now that he had said something like this, even the 10-directional holy devil couldn't help but hesitate. Could it be that Ling Shiqi really had a way? To tell you the truth, I have a mysterious secret realm in my hands. There's an extremely powerful inheritance in it. It's very useful even for reaching heaven states and holy spirits. That secret realm is called the underworld. Ling Shiqi briefly explained the existence of the underworld. He also told them that they had relied on the underworld to escape from the four saints. I'm here to invite everyone to join the underworld. However, since you've received something, you'll naturally have to give something in return. Once one joined Underworld, it was impossible for them to betray Underworld. Otherwise, they would be hunted down by all of Underworld's members. Oh right, I forgot to introduce him to everyone. As Ling Shiqi spoke, he pointed at Meng Tianzong. This is not only the palace lord of the Divine Dream Palace 10,000 years ago, but also Mengpu of the Underworld. This is the state preceptor of the West State Country, and also the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the Underworld. Only then did everyone realize that Tu Dang and Meng Tianzong had been working together with Ling Shiqi all this time. Meng Tianzong smiled. You must have suspected how I appeared in the passageway before. In fact, the Underworld has the ability to connect to space. As long as you join the Underworld, even if the four saints come in person, will still have the confidence to escape. She had helped Ling Shiqi add a stab. If they joined the Underworld, they would be in an invincible position. If they didn't join, then they would have to bear the wrath of the four saints. They were all considering it. They each had their own thoughts, and Ling Shiqi didn't force them. In the end, the old beggar, Gru, was the first to agree. With someone taking the lead, everyone else agreed first. Ling Shiqi laughed and waved his hand to bring everyone into the Underworld. Then, a series of imperial titles resounded through the world. The boundless ghost emperor of the South Pole, Tao Ancestor Qinkuan. The devil emperor of the West Pole, holy demon of the 10 directions. Emperor Song, king of the East Sea. King of Mount Tai, Gru. What surprised Ling Shiqi the most was that the beast venerable had actually obtained Daiding's inheritance. He had always thought that Daiding was the mount of the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, but he didn't expect that Daiding was also one of the inheritances of the Underworld. At this moment, the 5 ghost emperors and the 10 Yama kings had all gathered. It was truly an unprecedented time for the Underworld. Damn! They were still accepting the inheritance when the Dharma body of the Luin form king appeared in the distance, but these two words appeared. Ling Shiqi knew Oziu's personality. If it wasn't for something major, he wouldn't have lost his composure like this. He must have deduced something extraordinary. Ever since Ling Shiqi left the holy city, he had asked Oziu to find ways to deduce the four saints. Even if he could only deduce a little, it would be good. For so long, Oziu had been trying, but he couldn't deduce anything. Instead, he suffered backlash time and time again. Later on, he learned to be smart. He no longer deduced the four saints at once, but one by one. Just now, when he was deducing Huangwei Holy Sage, he finally had an idea. But it gave him a big fright. Ling Shiqi asked, "What did you deduce?" Oziu's expression was a little flustered. "Guess what? Huangwei Holy Sage of the Four Saints is already here." "What did you say?" Hearing this, Ling Shiqi was also shocked. Not long ago, he said that the four saints would come out sooner or later, but he didn't expect them to come so soon. Ling Shiqi quickly calmed down. "Tell me clearly, are the four saints all here, or is it just Huangwei Holy Sage? I can't deduce the other three saints at all. I can only deduce Huangwei Holy Sage." "He will find this place in the near future," Oziu replied. Ling Shiqi quietly heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, not all four of them came out, but only Huangwei Holy Sage. Just as he had said to everyone before, the four saints would definitely have to pay a high price to leave that space. Now that only Huangwei Holy Sage had come out, it proved this point. If he could come out so easily, then he wouldn't be the only one. You might be able to deduce the exact time. This. Oziu revealed a troubled expression. "The difference in strength between us is too great, I'm afraid." However, before Oziu could finish his sentence, Ling Shiqi pressed his palm on his shoulder, and then a trace of the underworld's origin energy entered his body. Suddenly, Oziu's Will King Dharma idol grew rapidly, and his cultivation broke through to the Tongxian realm. "What about now?" Ling Shiqi retracted his origin energy and said slowly. Oziu's jaw was about to drop. What was going on? He broke through with a casual pat. Was he still human? Chapter 947. Oziu swallowed his saliva. Even though Ling Shiqi had given him too many shocks, he still couldn't help but feel incomparably shocked. After a short while, he finally reacted and said, "Although there's still a big gap between me and the Huangwei Holy Sovereign, with the support of the underworld's power, I should be able to calculate a more specific time. I'll tell you later." Not long after, Oziu, who looked exhausted, returned. He said weakly, In about 5 days, Huangwei Holy Sage will come looking for me." 5 days. Ling Shiqi looked at the few people who were still in the inheritance. Within 5 days, they would definitely finish accepting the inheritance, and everyone's overall strength would increase by a huge leap. His mind spun rapidly as he gradually came up with a plan that could possibly kill Huangwei Saint Venerable. 5 days seemed to be very short, but Ling Shiqi had a way to make it very long. He waved his hand lightly, and the origin energy exploded, turning into a gray light that enveloped the few people who were receiving the inheritance. And in this area, the flow of time suddenly slowed down. A breath of time outside was 100 breaths of time inside. Ling Shiqi had slowed down the flow of time by 100 times. In the underworld, he was a god, and changing the flow of time was easy. Therefore, although Huangwei Holy Sage would only be here in 5 days, Ling Shiqi and the others had more than a year to prepare. Ling Shiqi created a clone and sat cross-legged. He also needed time to comprehend more of the power of law and create the most suitable spirit skill for himself. His clone went out to disperse the people of the Western Wasteland King's mansion, and told the spirit cultivators and ordinary people within a radius of 10,000 miles to move away as soon as possible, so as to avoid any unexpected disasters. 5 days later, Huang Wei Holy Sage appeared in the sky above the Western Wasteland King's mansion. His purpose here was to kill Gulu, who had destroyed his Huang Wei spirit region. It was actually very easy for Huang Wei Holy Sage to find Gulu's location, and he could also find this place in an extremely short period of time. However, he did not immediately come over because he also needed to recover a certain amount of strength. His saint power was greatly depleted when he came out of the passageway. Originally, he wanted to use the things left behind by the Royal Prestige spiritual region, but unfortunately, the spiritual region was destroyed. He had no choice but to search for some of the resources that had been left behind in the past. However, after hundreds of thousands of years, they had long been taken away by generations of people as opportunities. Huang Wei Saint Venerable finally recovered some of his strength and charged into the West Baron King Manor. However, when he arrived, he discovered that there was almost no one within a radius of 10,000 miles. Even in a king's mansion, there was only one person. That person was Ling Shiqi. "It's you." Huang Wei Holy Sage naturally recognized Ling Shiqi as one of the people from back then. "The Royal Majesty Holy Lord is here in person." "I am terrified." Ling Shiqi said the word terrified, but there was a smile on his face. Huang Wei's saintly venerate's expression turned cold. Immediately, the world darkened and there seemed to be thunder roaring. "I gave you a way to live, but you didn't want to choose a way to die." Ling Shiqi sneered. "What way to live? What way to die? I only know that if I'm in the hands of you four so-called human saints, I'll die without a burial place. Since I'm here in person, you're all useless trash. It's a good time to get rid of you rats." Huang Wei's saintly venerable began to exude killing intent. Ling Shiqi tilted his head and extended a finger. Huang Wei's saintly venerable's eyes were filled with killing intent. He clenched his hand and a heavy saint sword appeared. It was named after himself, Huang Wei Saint Sword. The real Huang Wei Saint Sword. He had only left behind a replica saint sword for his descendants. Although it was also a saint weapon, his sword had been nurtured for hundreds of thousands of years. It had long surpassed the category of a saint weapon. The royal might's sacred sword fell. This sword seemed ordinary, but it had already abandoned all sword moves and returned to its original state. It was only until the moment the sword fell that it exploded with a powerful might that was enough to split mountains and break rivers. His sword move, engulfing mountains and rivers, was incomparably majestic. It was also an extremely domineering sword move. That kind of domineering was unlike Xiahou Ba's wild and unrestrained style, but it was the domineering aura of an emperor who ruled over the world. It was as if under this sword, both gods and ghosts would be torn apart. The sharp aura from the saint's sword made Ling Shiqi feel pain all over his body. Hellish flames rose around him. At the same time, his body completely disappeared. The saint's sword fell and created a large vacuum in the hellish flames. However, Huang Wei's saintly venerable felt that he did not hit Ling Shiqi at all. He scanned with his divine sense and tried his best to sense. However, Ling Shiqi's body had really disappeared. Only the hellish flames proved that Ling Shiqi was still here, turning into 10,000 flames. This is something that only a saint spirit expert who has comprehended the law of fire to the extreme can do. However, even a saint spirit expert cannot stop me. Huang Wei's saintly venerable raised his saint sword. Saint light shot into the sky. A 10,000 feet long saint dragon appeared behind him. It was very lifelike. The dragon's roar was filled with endless saint aura and killing intent. The strange thing was that the sacred dragon's eyes were emitting a dense blood-red color. As he slashed out with his sword, it was as if all laws had been extinguished. The netherworld flames were all extinguished, and Ling Shiqi's figure was also forced out in a sorry state. He suddenly swung his sword. The void cracked. The sword transformed into the three realms of gods, demons, and Buddhas. What was different from before was that the three different sword techniques actually split the world. Ling Shiqi had also integrated the law of space into the three realms. The power of the three realms suppressed the Saint Dragon. The sword technique slashed the body, heart, and soul. The strange sword technique clashed head-on with Huang Wei's saintly venerable saint sword. Within 1,000 miles, the space was cracked. The powerful sword and saber chi were exploding. Even Sky Origin stage cultivators would be torn into pieces if they got too close to the fight. During the fight, Ling Shiqi flipped his left hand. A shocking sword intent surged out. The Emperor of Fengdu's Dharma form appeared behind him. As the sword slashed down, all the powers in the world were melted away. The sword of reincarnation slashed at the Saint Dragon. The power of reincarnation exploded and instantly cut off a part of the Saint Dragon's body. This caused Huang Wei's saintly venerable sword intent to weaken. Boom! After a loud explosion, the void cracked. Ling Shiqi and Huang Wei's saintly venerable both retreated. Huang Wei's saintly venerable retreated a few feet. However, Ling Shiqi flew a few hundred feet away. He had to use 2 moves to barely block Huang Wei's saintly venerable sword. He was even forced to retreat so far. Ling Shiqi had lost the fight. However, Huang Wei's saintly venerable's face darkened. Although his saint power was greatly damaged, he could only maintain his saint spirit realm. However, his accumulation over hundreds of thousands of years was unparalleled. Even if he were to fight a saint spirit expert in his peak state, he would not be at a disadvantage. However, he could not hurt Ling Shiqi even after using 2 moves. Chapter 948. What surprised him even more was that not only did Ling Shiqi cultivate the law of fire, but he also cultivated the law of space and the law of reincarnation. Huang Wei's saintly sage had come to kill Gru, but instead of Gru, he found Ling Shiqi. He had never seen Ling Shiqi in action before, so he did not know anything about Ling Shiqi. Of course, he did not bother to search for information about Ling Shiqi in advance. In his opinion, no one in the Falling Star continent was worthy of his effort. However, Ling Shiqi made him feel that it was a little tricky. Ling Shiqi was not a saint spirit elite, and he did not have any saint energy or saint soul. However, his comprehension of the law of fire had reached a terrifying level, far beyond the Ascension realm. Huang Wei's saintly sage's strength had been greatly reduced, and he had many important things to do. If he wanted to kill Ling Shiqi, he would need to consume a large amount of saint energy, which made him hesitate. However, he quickly threw that hesitation to the back of his mind. If he could not kill a mere Ling Shiqi, he would be utterly humiliated. Suddenly, Huang Wei's saintly saint's body shone with red light. Red runes bloomed and covered his body like armor. Even the saintly dragon behind him was the same. Then, a glorious, majestic, and evil aura spread out. As the sword slashed down, the saint dragon roared. However, it was not an angry roar, but a mournful cry. Huang Wei's saintly sage's sword shattered heaven and earth, and the sword split the world. The terrifying sword intent was so real that it made people despair. Ling Shiqi closed his eyes. The next moment, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared behind him. With a thought, the 6 paths of reincarnation turned into 6 realms. Heaven realm, human realm, Shura realm, hungry ghost realm, animal realm, and hell realm. The power of the 6 realms rotated, and the power of the 6 realms exploded, causing the space to shatter and everything to be destroyed. Ling Shiqi merged the law of reincarnation and the law of space into one. It was a powerful spiritual technique created by combining the power of reincarnation and the power of space. World of Six Paths of Reincarnation. When the two of them collided, the powerful force immediately exploded the void, even causing the entire space to tremble. It turned into a boundless origin chi storm that swept out for thousands of miles. This scene was simply like the end of the world. Just as the two of them were exchanging blows, several figures forcibly withstood the terrifying shockwaves and strangely appeared in the surroundings. These people were all dressed in luxurious black and gold robes and wore masks of various shapes and sizes. Their bodies surged with the aura of death. They were none other than the ghost emperors of the underworld and the Yama kings of the 10 palaces. The leaders were Tao ancestor Qian Kun and the 10 sky demons, the strongest few. They did not appear to fight Holy Venerate Huang Wei head-on. Instead, they formed seals with their hands. Boundless netherworld chi permeated the heaven and earth, and a heaven-reaching gate to the underworld was summoned by them. Immediately after, an extremely powerful suction force surged out from the gate of the underworld. It even formed many huge arms that wanted to pull Huang Wei's saintly sage in. Humph, how dare these losers and weaklings threaten me? Huang Wei's saintly sage sneered when he saw Tao ancestor Qian Kun, Meng Tianzong, and the others suddenly appear. With a gentle wave of the sacred sword, all the arms were cut off. However, in this short moment, Ling Shiqi's body was covered with colorful threads. In the blink of an eye, those dazzling threads weaved into a huge net that covered the sky and slowly fell. Huang Wei's saintly sage could not help but be shocked when he saw this. He immediately stopped looking down on Ling Shiqi because every thread was a thread of law. The appearance of the net of law meant that Ling Shiqi had almost mastered all the laws of heaven and earth in the world. How was this possible? A sword chime sounded. Huang Wei's saintly sage swung the sacred sword in his hand. This sword tore through space and time, shattering the sky and earth. In just an instant, the net of law weaved by Ling Shiqi was broken in less than 2 breaths. Ling Shiqi did not care about the net of law at all. That was just a lie. Then, he forced his way into Huang Wei's saintly sage's sword realm. His body was immediately covered in blood and his meridians were all broken. His skin was burned by the sacred power, revealing his white bones. Even so, he did not care. His body suddenly flashed and he crossed space and grabbed Huang Wei's saintly sage. The suction force of the gate of the dead behind him grew stronger and countless gray hands extended out. Are you crazy? You're courting death. Huang Wei's saintly sage felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He swung his sacred sword and was about to kill Ling Shiqi. However, at this moment, Ling Shiqi's eyes were burning with blood-red flames. He started to burn his blood essence and even his divine soul. Immediately, the space between heaven and earth froze. An invisible power of law suddenly appeared. Huang Wei's saintly sage realized that the time around him seemed to have frozen. He could not even blink his eyes. It was to the extent that his thoughts were frozen at this moment. Time law, time stop. Swoosh. Using this opportunity, Huang Wei's saintly sage was dragged into the gate of the dead by Ling Shiqi. Huang Wei's saintly sage felt that he was being eroded by endless netherworld energy. He spread out his divine consciousness but realized that it stopped after spreading out for a few miles. Not only that, but the sacred power in his body was rapidly dissipating. He could not even sense the power of law. He was shocked. What is this place? Ling Shiqi transformed into the Emperor of Fengdu and said coldly, "Welcome to my world." The 5 ghost emperors and the 10 kings of hell appeared. Waves of cold and terrifying netherworld energy surged and shrouded Huang Wei's saintly sage. At this moment, Huang Wei's saintly sage was shocked. The aura of these people who suddenly appeared in front of him was comparable to that of a sacred spirit expert. On the other hand, he could not sense any power of law at all. This caused the sacred power in his body to dissipate at an unbelievable speed. Most importantly, his physical body was not his own. It was stolen. In the blink of an eye, it turned into ashes. Only a weak sacred soul was left. Those towering Dharma idols stared at Huang Wei saintly sage's sacred soul. Their eyes shone with a terrifying green light. They were like hungry wolves that saw prey that could not move. In just a few seconds, Huang Wei's saintly sage turned from a sacred spirit expert who had dominated the falling star continent for hundreds of thousands of years to a soul that could be slaughtered at any time. Just this change in mentality was hard for him to accept. However, he had no choice but to accept this reality. This is not the falling star continent, nor is it the middle realm. Who are you? Huang Wei's saintly sage realized that he had inexplicably walked to the edge of death. He exclaimed, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I know many secrets of heaven and earth. I know countless opportunities and countless cultivation techniques and spiritual techniques. You must still want to deal with 6 Unity Saintly Sage and the others. I can tell you their weaknesses. I'm still very useful." An absolute sage of the human race was actually begging for mercy. Chapter 949. Ling Shiqi transformed into the image of the Emperor of Fengdu and exuded a murderous aura. The dignified Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate has such an attitude. How is he different from an ordinary person? Then, he opened his mouth and said, "Die." Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate's expression froze, and his saint soul dimmed. Ling Shiqi's words were law, and he easily took away Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate's life. A Heavenly Venerate had fallen just like that. Ling Shiqi kept Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate's saint soul. What Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate had said had tempted Ling Shiqi, but as long as he had Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate's saint soul in his hands, he would know everything. When the others saw Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate die just like that, they were in disbelief. Especially Tao Ancestor Qian Kun and 10-directional Holy Demon, who had almost died. They had fought with the 4 saints before, and they knew how terrifying they were. However, the insufferably arrogant Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate had died in front of them. Moreover, Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate's attitude before he died made everyone understand that Heavenly Venerate and Absolute Saint were no different from ordinary people in the face of death. The reverence in his heart had also disappeared. Ling Shiqi said, "The most difficult part of this battle is not fighting Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate head-on, but how to drag him into the mansion of hell. As you can see, in the mansion of hell, your strength is comparable to a Holy Spirit expert. However, if an outsider enters, he will lose all his strength like Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate, and he will be at our mercy. Therefore, the 4 saints have nothing to be afraid of. Even if Luoying Heavenly Venerate, 6 Unity Heavenly Venerate, and Martial Extremity Heavenly Venerate come at the same time, we still have a chance of winning." Killing Huang Wei Holy Venerate could be considered as a reassurance pill for everyone to eat. You have not fully comprehended the inheritance of the mansion of hell. Before the other 3 Heavenly Venerates appear, hurry up and increase your strength. The stronger we are, the more confident we will be. Everyone felt deeply moved, and they immediately dispersed to cultivate. Ling Shiqi took Huang Wei Heavenly Venerate Saint's soul and walked into the Fengdu Imperial Palace. He first spent some time recuperating from his injuries. His injuries were actually very serious. If he had been in the outside world, he would have needed decades to recover. However, in the underworld, he had only needed a few hours to fully recover from his injuries. Taking out Huang Wei Holy Sovereign Saint's soul, Ling Shiqi tapped it lightly with his finger. Immediately, countless memories turned into images and scattered in all directions. Ling Shiqi's eyes flashed as he quickly scanned through Huang Wei's memories. He finally found the secret of the 4 saints. In the passageway, most of the information that Sacred Sovereign Wu Ji had told them was true. However, there were 2 things that he had lied about. First of all, the 4 saints had actually been possessed long ago. They knew that the outside world was barren of spiritual energy, and had even been stripped of the recognition of the heavens and earth. When the first Holy Spirit Master entered that place, they were already possessed. They immediately killed that Holy Spirit Master and devoured all the Holy Spirit Master's Holy Spirit Master. There was another point. The main reason why the four saints did not return to the falling star continent was not to protect the human race, nor was it to seal the whirlpool. It was because the star tribe had tampered with that passageway. It was not that the star tribe did not guard against the human tribe, especially the passageway that concerned the entire tribe. They had set up a secret formation in the passageway. Everyone could enter, but other than those who had the bloodline of the star tribe, no one could leave. Unless one had the power to destroy all the arrays. Actually, with the four saints' strength, they stood a chance. Unfortunately, the star tribe's array was completely targeted at the human race. As long as they came into contact with the array, their Holy Spirit Master would be continuously absorbed. Not only would they lose their Holy Spirit Master, but they would also strengthen the array. Therefore, the four saints had been accumulating their Holy Spirit Master for a long time. They wanted to break through the array and even refine the falling star continent to transcend the middle element world. To refine the falling star continent, they did not only need to absorb all the spiritual energy on the continent, but also all the living creatures. They wanted to sacrifice all the living creatures on the continent to provide them with power. Ling Shiqi was right. The four saints wanted to destroy the falling star continent. Most importantly, Ling Shiqi knew that the four saints were not so united and harmonious. They had joined forces because they had the same goal. However, the spiritual energy on the falling star continent was not very abundant. Could it really support the four of them to transcend? If they were alone, the chances of success would be much higher. Therefore, the four saints had always been scheming against each other. It was just that they had never revealed it. This time, Huang Wei the holy sage came out alone for his own selfish reasons. The four saints had agreed that each of them would take one dragon's vein. His purpose was to monopolize all four dragons' veins. When he gathered the world's qi, the other three would not be able to do anything. Unfortunately, before he could find the dragon's veins, he had already fallen here. In addition, what shocked Ling Shiqi the most was that after hundreds of thousands of years, the four saints had actually comprehended a set of skills that could allow them to avoid the heaven's death tribulation and directly become a saint. Avoid the heavenly tribulation. Suddenly, Ling Shiqi thought of a person, or rather, a ghost. He stretched out his hand and beast ghost Zhuozhou appeared beside him. Back then, Zhuozhou ran to the demon miasma mountain range and used a secret method to make the demon Sable and Star and Moon Heavenly Winged Tiger become rank 7 great monsters without passing the heavenly tribulation. Even if there were some hidden dangers after the advancement, they were still rank 7 great monsters. At first, Ling Shiqi did not care much about the secret method. It was not until the beast Venerable also took a fancy to the secret method that he began to pay attention to it. It was a pity that his later experiences were too complicated. He did not have the time and energy to study the secret method, so he put it aside. Now that he had seen the secret method that the four saints had researched, he remembered that Zhuozhou had done something similar. He wanted Zhuozhou's secret method. It did not matter at first glance. He found that Zhuozhou and the four saints' secret method were actually similar. Ling Shiqi could not help but look up to Zhuozhou. A Sky Origin Realm spirit cultivator was actually able to create such a miraculous secret method. The key point of this secret method was to avoid touching the power of heaven and earth. For example, Ling Shiqi's world extermination force was a powerful force that could directly trigger the will of heaven and earth. But if the world extermination force was transformed, its essence would still be the world extermination force, but the aura it emitted would be different. This way, it could avoid the will of heaven and earth. It could be said that it was an opportunistic method that was very difficult to achieve. But once it was done, Ling Shiqi would have a chance to avoid the Heavenly Slayer tribulation and directly become a saint. In the end, he swallowed Huang Wei Saint Venerable Saint's soul in one gulp. Just as Ling Shiqi began to plan for himself, in the passage, 6 Unity Saint Venerable, Extreme Martial Saint Venerable and Luoying Saint Venerable's faces were gloomy. The surrounding cold air was almost able to freeze the space. Huang Wei has fallen. Unbelievable. We have been forced into a desperate situation. It is time to make a decision. Extreme Martial Saint Venerable said resolutely. The other two understood what Extreme Martial Saint Venerable meant. The only way out was to personally go to the Falling Star continent. Chapter 950. They had no other chances. With the vortex erupting more frequently, they did not have enough time and strength. They could only finish everything before the next vortex erupts. Saint Master Wuji's Saint Power surged, and his fighting spirit soared. Let's go. The 3 saints of the Falling Star continent were about to descend. A few days later, in the Mansion of the Dead. Have you really made up your mind? Dao Ancestor Qinkuan stood beside Ling Shiqi and asked. At this time, he had already refined Saint Master Huangwei's saint soul, and his cultivation was only a step away from becoming a saint spirit master. He nodded and said, "This is the only way. A little carelessness and you will be crushed. Won't you regret it? I don't have a choice, do I? It's good to be young. Forget it, I'll go crazy with you this time." After Dao Ancestor Qinkuan finished speaking, a strong saint light rose from his body, and then all the saint light poured into Ling Shiqi's body. This is all I have left. Since I've taken the wrong path, it's better to start all over again. Your plan may have a chance of success. You've refined Saint Master Huangwei's saint soul, but it won't work if you never master real saint power. Ling Shiqi closed his eyes slightly and carefully felt the majestic saint power in his body. It was indeed different from all the powers he had mastered. With this power, his plan would definitely be much smoother. I can't repay this kindness. If you can really go against the heavens, it will be a great benefit for me. This saint power is nothing. While speaking, Ling Shiqi's expression suddenly became serious. He said, King Luanzhuan has found the other 3 saint masters. They've come out. So fast. Dao Ancestor Qinkuan's expression also became serious. Their primary goal must be the dragon vein. In order to not harm the world, we can only fight them at the pole of the East Sea. How's the King of the East Sea's arrangement? All the formation masters in the world are there, using the world's best materials and the power of several Ascension Realm cultivators. Coupled with the power of the Mansion of the Dead, it can definitely pose a threat to the 4 saints. Unfortunately, it can only be used once, Dao Ancestor Qinkuan replied. That's enough. After that, Ling Shiqi brought everyone from the underworld to the East Sea. After setting everything up, everyone entered the underworld and cultivated under the slowed down time, waiting for the 3 absolute saints to arrive. After the 3 saints returned to the Falling Star continent, they first went to the spirit realm that they had created, just like the Royal Might Sacred Sovereign, and the result was just as shocked and angry as the Royal Might Sacred Sovereign. Then, the 3 of them went to the dragon veins of the previous 3 dynasties, only to find that the 3 dragon veins were long gone. The 4 of them were extremely furious, but they didn't go on a killing spree. They didn't even alarm anyone, because those people were about to be refined in their eyes. In the end, just as Ling Shiqi expected, they came to the end of the Eastern Sea together to search for the last dragon vein. Here, they met the Ling Shiqi. Seeing the 3 saints, Ling Shiqi wasn't afraid at all. He smiled brightly and said, I've been waiting for you 3 for a long time. The moment the 3 saints saw Ling Shiqi, they felt the aura of the Royal Might Sacred Sovereign Saint Soul on him, and their expressions turned cold. Luoying Spirit Sovereign said with murderous intent, "You killed Royal Might's Sacred Sovereign." "It doesn't matter." Ling Shiqi shook his head and said, "Do you want to avenge the Royal Might's Sacred Sovereign?" "Forgive me, but the death of the Royal Might's Sacred Sovereign means that there's one less person to share the remaining power of the falling star continent." "I'm helping you, aren't I?" "Nonsense." Six Unity Holy Sovereign immediately shouted, "The four of us are like one. Today, I'll kill this little bastard to relieve the hatred in my heart." "Ha ha ha, that's right. Kill me and you can take back the power of the dragon veins. However, I have 4 dragon veins in my body. How are the 3 of you going to split them?" "You." Six Unity Holy Sovereign was about to speak. Suddenly, 9 blazing suns rose into the sky. Purple aura shone from the east, and the array set up by the Luoying Spirit Sovereign was melted by the 9 blazing suns. "Who is it?" Luoying Spirit Sovereign asked in surprise. Even though she had lost a lot of her power, only a genuine Holy Spirit Master would be able to break through the formation she had set up so easily. However, there was no such person in the world. Ling Shiqi also felt strange. He turned his head and saw a figure walking out of the blazing suns. He looked both familiar and unfamiliar. From his appearance, that person was the Pure Yang Sacred Master. After they left the Holy City, they didn't go with Ling Shiqi and the others. Instead, they left alone. However, the aura emitted by the Pure Yang Sacred Master and his eyes told Ling Shiqi that he was no longer the Pure Yang Sacred Master of the past. The power of the sacred light that overflowed with a wave of his hand was not much weaker than that of the 4 sacred sovereigns. Tao Ancestor Heaven and Earth suddenly said, "No wonder I felt a sense of familiarity when I first saw him. He's a sacred sovereign tens of thousands of years before me and the 10-directional Holy Devil, the supreme sage of the 9 suns." The 10-directional Holy Devil looked at him for a while and suddenly said, "I understand now. What a supreme sage of the 9 suns. I guess he left a backup plan before he entered the Holy City. He kept a part of his sacred soul, sacred power, and memories because he was afraid that something would happen to him." The one who entered the Holy City not long ago was probably the remnant of his soul. He obtained his original physical body inside and used the sacred power that he accumulated for 200,000 years to become who he is today. He's cautious and patient enough. Ling Shiqi also remembered that after they entered the space tunnel, the Pure Yang Sacred Master had indeed taken away a sacred sovereign's corpse. So that was his original physical body. No, he was no longer the Pure Yang Sacred Master. He was the supreme sage of the 9 suns. And now, it seemed that the Pure Yang Holy Temple was built with the remnant power that the supreme sage of the 9 suns left behind. It had been accumulating power for a long time until the Holy City appeared. "You killed me once in the past. Let's see if you can kill me again." The supreme sage of the 9 suns burned like fire, but his words were as cold as ice. The 3 sacred sovereigns felt that they were in trouble. Judging from the supreme sage of the 9 suns' aura, his power was no different from that of an ordinary sacred sovereign. For so many years, he had not used his sacred power and had been accumulating it. On the other hand, the 3 sacred sovereigns had less than a tenth of their sacred power left. Even if they were confident that they could defeat the supreme sage of the 9 suns, it would greatly deplete their power. In this way, it would be difficult to complete their plan, not to mention transcending this world. However, the supreme sage of the 9 suns waved his hand and attacked the Luoying saint with the terrifying power of the sun. Back then, it was the Luoying saint who had killed him. "If I can kill you once, I can naturally kill you a second time." The Luoying saint's hands were like a fairy scattering petals as she performed countless spiritual spells. Cherry blossoms rained down from the sky and looked like they were going to destroy the 9 blazing suns. Just like that, the 2 powerful beings began to fight. Chapter 951. Spirit Venerable Luoying was being held back by Supreme Sage 9 Sons. Holy Venerable Wu Ji and Holy Venerable 6 Directions could not be bothered to waste any more time. They knew that the longer they dragged on, the more problems would arise. Now, it was better to kill Lang Shiqi first and retrieve the power of the dragon vein. Holy Venerable 6 Directions formed a seal with his hands, and an endless void appeared in the sky. As the heavens evolved, 6 holy statues that emitted a brilliant holy aura slowly descended. The space seemed to be unable to withstand that power, and it was squeezed until it emitted a strange sound. This was the holy statue of 6 Directions, the real holy statue of 6 Directions. Holy Venerable 6 Directions pointed with his finger, and each of the holy statues did the same. Suddenly, 7 lightning-like finger forces intersected with each other and cut through heaven and earth as they charged toward Lang Shiqi. However, Lang Shiqi's body mysteriously disappeared. Then, the space behind Holy Venerable 6 Directions rippled, and Lang Shiqi's arm reached out from the void. A purple light flashed, and Holy Venerable 6 Directions spat out 3 feet of blood. His right arm was even broken. The holy statue of 6 Directions collapsed. With just one attack, Holy Venerable 6 Directions was severely injured. True Essence Flash. This was a strange move that Lang Shiqi had specially exchanged from the system. The stronger the opponent, the more damage he would suffer. This was the power of law from another world. With just one attack, he had severely injured Holy Venerable 6 Directions. Holy Venerable 6 Directions was shocked. He had been severely injured before the battle had even begun. How could Lang Shiqi be so strong? However, he never expected that a formless and terrifying power would suddenly surge around Lang Shiqi. It was formless and formless, but it was filled with a dangerous aura. With a gentle wave of his hand, heaven and earth froze. Everything came to a standstill. Spiritual energy, laws, aura, everything was frozen in this moment. Lang Shiqi waved his hand again, and a terrifying power that could destroy the world tore through the void. With Holy Venerable 6 Directions as the center, the space within a 100-mile radius directly collapsed. Boundless spatial turbulence engulfed Holy Master 6 Unity. Even though he had already broken free from the shackles of time, his body was still covered in bloody wounds. He was quite injured. In the end, Lang Shiqi waved his hands and smoothed out the collapsed space, completely banishing Holy Master 6 Unity into the turbulent flow of space. As for what would happen to him, there was only death. No matter how powerful a Holy Spirit Master was, they would not be able to survive in the turbulent flow of space. Perhaps he could hold on for a while, but he couldn't hold on for a lifetime. The Lang Shiqi had suddenly erupted and killed Holy Venerate 6 Unity in just 2 breaths. This was something that no one had expected. That was one of the absolute saints of the human race, Holy Sage 6 Directions. How could he have died just like that? Also, no matter how strong Lang Shiqi is, he can't be this strong. Sacred Supremacy Martial Extremity was even more alarmed. He knew very well that Sacred Supremacy 6 Unity still had many trump cards he had yet to use. Yet, he had been exiled just like that. Furthermore, he had never seen the power that Lang Shiqi had unleashed before. It could directly cause space to collapse, but it wasn't spatial laws. Lang Shiqi had indeed not used spatial laws, but the power of destruction. The various origins powers of a world would eventually evolve into 2 types of powers. One was the power of creation, and the other was the power of destruction. A long time ago, Lang Shiqi had attempted to fuse the various origins powers, but unfortunately, he had failed. If he succeeded, perhaps he would be able to comprehend the power of creation. In the Ashen Aeon world, he had comprehended the power of destruction by chance. It was also there that he attracted the Heavenly Slayer Tribulation. After a long period of meditation and the augmentation of the underworld's power, the power of destruction now definitely had the destructive power of destruction. It had directly killed Holy Venerate 6 Unity in one strike. With his absolute strength, killing one of the 4 saints before they could unleash their full strength was something that Lang Shiqi had planned for a long time. No matter how long he had prepared, it was impossible for him to have prepared for longer than the 4 saints. No matter how prepared he was, he could not compare to the 4 saints who had accumulated strength for hundreds of thousands of years. If they were to fight slowly, no matter how many trump cards Lang Shiqi had, he would not have much confidence in winning. Therefore, he had to end the battle quickly. As for who to kill first, it would depend on who made the first move. Generally speaking, when the other party saw you as a true opponent, the first person to attack would not use their full strength. Instead, they would test the waters first. This was not only the habit of the 4 saints, but also the habit of all experts. This was because the more powerful a spirit cultivator was, the more they knew that they could not be easily injured. Therefore, when they fought, they would first test each other and roughly understand each other's strength before deciding whether to fight to the death or something else. Lang Shiqi had grasped this habit of not being noticed by others and had inconceivably killed Holy Venerate 6 Unity. However, in this way, he had consumed a lot of energy and had used the power of destruction. It was very likely that it would attract the attention of the will of the heavens and earth. He did not care, as long as he could kill one person first and make his plan go smoothly. Holy Venerate Wuji no longer hesitated. He took a step forward and punched out. In an instant, space trembled and the heavens and earth split open. Lang Shiqi's body blossomed with Buddhist light and devil chi rose. Other than that, there was also a boundless amount of Tao energy. The 3 completely different powers of Buddhism, Tao, and Devil were perfectly combined in his body. He held up the sky with both hands and forcefully resisted the fist that shook the heavens. However, he was only sent flying a distance away and was not injured at all. Holy Venerate Wuji frowned. Devil arts were relatively common, and there was also Tao Ancestor Heaven and Earth. However, the Tao energy that Lang Shiqi displayed was completely different from that of Tao Ancestor Heaven and Earth. There was also that Buddhist light, which was a strange power that Holy Venerate Wuji had never seen before. He boasted that he had cultivated all kinds of arts in the world, but he had never seen such a spiritual aura. Holy Venerate Wuji's fingers were like a sword, and his body was like a sharp long sword. He used his body as a sword to cut through the void, and his terrifying holy aura made the heavens and earth pale. He did not have a sword in his hand, but an endless amount of sword will soared into the sky. He was not a pure sword cultivator like Chen Xan, nor was he as domineering as Holy Venerate Huang Wei. He only had the simplest sword will, but the simpler it was, the stronger it was in his hands. The Emperor of Fengdu's Dharma idol shadow appeared behind Lang Shiqi, and the power of reincarnation erupted, rotating all the power in the world. The terrifying sword will was infinitely weakened. When it reached Lang Shiqi, it was already thousands of times weaker. Countless reincarnation sword shadows easily shattered it. After devouring Holy Venerate Huang Wei's saint soul and obtaining Tao Ancestor Heaven and Earth's saint power, Lang Shiqi's power had undergone a fundamental change. In addition, he had comprehended the law of reincarnation to the extreme. He was actually not at a disadvantage when fighting with Holy Venerate Wuji. Even though Holy Venerate Wuji's strength was only 1/10 of his original, it was still shocking enough. Holy Venerate Wuji was even more shocked when he could not do anything to Lang Shiqi. At the same time, he knew that he could not delay any longer. Even though Holy Venerate 6 Unity's death was actually beneficial to him, Lang Shiqi was too big of a variable. He had to kill him. Chapter 952. Martial Saint Sovereign punched out again. At this moment, a dragon's roar could be heard in midair. A divine dragon that was extremely similar to Martial Saint Sovereign rushed into the 9 heavens. He himself was also above the 9 heavens. His body was straight like a dragon spear. His punch was the tip of the spear. When the spear fell, it pierced through the heavens. This was both a punch and a spear. The fist and the spear had merged into one. Ling Shiqi had finally accumulated enough power. A Tai Chi yin-yang diagram suddenly appeared, flashing with the majestic power of yin and yang. At the same time, the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared, forming 6 realms that revolved around the Tai Chi yin-yang diagram. At this moment, time and space froze. It was as if there were only the Tai Chi yin-yang diagram in the world. Everything else seemed to have been hidden in the void. Behind him, shadows of the Master of Samsara, the Huang Heaven Demon Emperor, the Nether Holy Lord, and the others appeared. He had already unleashed the power of the law of Samsara to the limit. He had also merged the power of yin and yang, the power of Samsara, the power of space, and even the power of time into one. The 3 supreme laws combined with the power of yin and yang could create and destroy the world. It was also at this moment that a huge formation that spanned a few hundred kilometers appeared. It contained an explosive power. The formation had several formation cores, and each formation core contained a supreme treasure. For example, the Thunderfire Dynasty's supreme treasure, the Thunderfire Heavenly Pearl, and the Starfall Dynasty's supreme treasure, the Stellar Divine Stone. At the center of the formation, Dao Ancestor Chenkuan, the 10 Sky Fiends, Tu Deng, Meng Tianzong, and the other experts activated the formation at the same time. All of their power gathered into a sharp arrow. This arrow was only as thick as a finger. It shone with all kinds of colors and was very dazzling. The arrow locked onto Marshal Saint Sovereign. At this moment, he actually felt a trace of threat. When Sovereign Beast saw the Huang Heaven Demon Emperor appear behind Ling Shiqi, his expression changed. At the same time, he seemed to understand something. The arrow that gathered all of the strongest power in the Starfall continent suddenly shot out. It directly pierced through space, leaving a pitch-black spatial crack in the air as it shot towards Marshal Saint Sovereign with boundless power. At the same time, he had to face the Ling Shiqi's powerful origin energy and be wary of that arrow. Saint Venerable Wu Ji's blood boiled, and his veins popped out. Holy light stained with blood soared into the sky. A Dharma idol that towered into the clouds appeared behind him. The Dharma idol was actually his own appearance. Saint Venerable Wu Ji didn't believe in heaven, earth, or gods and devils. He only believed in himself. The avatar raised its hands to the sky, intending to tear the sky apart. The power that was strong enough to split the sky instantly shattered the arrow that had gathered all the power of the falling star continent. Even Ling Shiqi's Tai Chi diagram was on the verge of collapse. However, the corners of Ling Shiqi's mouth curled into a triumphant smile. What he wanted was for Saint Venerable Wu Ji to unleash his full strength, because after that, Saint Venerable Wu Ji would definitely be in a relatively weak state. His body flickered, and another Ling Shiqi stepped out. This was not his avatar, but his past self. The past Ling Shiqi directly summoned the gate of the underworld, and countless giant gray hands pulled at Saint Venerable Wu Ji from behind. Saint Venerable Wu Ji, who was suppressing the Tai Chi diagram with all his strength, didn't expect Ling Shiqi to have such a strange method. What was even more strange was that the holy power around him didn't affect those giant gray hands at all. It was as if the two of them didn't exist in the same world. He was wrong. It should be said that they didn't exist in the same time. No matter how strong Saint Venerable Wu Ji's power was, it was still the power of the present. Those giant hands came from the past. What was even stranger was that those giant hands didn't pull away Saint Venerable Wu Ji's body, but his saint soul. Ah! Saint Venerable Wu Ji screamed as his saint soul was forcefully taken away. After losing his saint soul, his aura suddenly plummeted. His holy power continued to leak out. In just a breath's time, he fell to the Ascension realm and continued to weaken. The 10 directional holy demon's demonic aura surged as he laughed loudly. Old Wuji, to think that you would have such a day. Then, several Ascension Realm cultivators rushed forward. In just a few moves, Saint Venerable Wuji died. 2 absolute saints died one after another. On the other side, Luo Ying, who was still fighting with the Supreme Sage of the Nine Suns, felt a chill run down her spine. Especially with Ling Shiqi's strange ability, she didn't have the confidence to resist. The Supreme Sage of the Nine Suns in front of her was only slightly weaker than her. If Ling Shiqi and the others joined in, she would probably die here today. However, all of the dragon veins were in Ling Shiqi's body. If she retreated, there would be no possibility of her transcendence. However, Ling Shiqi's gaze was already locked onto her. In front of Luo Ying, he directly swallowed the holy souls of Saint Venerable Six Unity and Saint Venerable Wuji. His entire body was enveloped in a dense holy light, and his aura suddenly skyrocketed. Luo Ying was shocked. She didn't want the dragon veins. She had to temporarily avoid them. Unfortunately, the Supreme Sage of the Nine Suns had turned into absolute yang and blocked all of her escape routes. Under the combined efforts of Ling Shiqi and the Supreme Sage of the Nine Suns, Luo Ying had fallen. At this point, the 4 absolute saints of the human race had all fallen. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they were deeply shocked by Ling Shiqi. They had actually killed the 4 absolute saints. Especially the 10 heavenly demons, Tao Ancestor Qinquan, and the Supreme Sage of the Nine Suns. They had all been killed by the 4 absolute saints. Now that they had gotten revenge, they were really happy. Ling Shiqi didn't look happy. He continued to swallow Luo Ying's holy soul, and the holy light around his body seemed to solidify. Immediately after, his divine soul suddenly left his body and quietly turned into the color of the holy gold in front of everyone's eyes. That was a holy soul. A holy soul that only a Holy Spirit Master could have. That's right. Ling Shiqi's goal wasn't to kill the 4 absolute saints, but to steal their holy power and ignore the will of heaven and earth to forcefully become a saint. He had done it. However, this action would definitely attract the attention of the will of heaven and earth. It was very likely that it would directly come to the falling star continent. That was not the heavenly death tribulation. It was the true will of heaven and earth. The calamity of Heavenly Slayer was only a small part of the will of heaven and earth. Back then, Ling Shiqi couldn't resist at all and was killed by the calamity of Heavenly Slayer. Now, he had to face the will of heaven and earth. Thousands of miles away, the 10 heavenly demons just smiled happily. The 4 absolute saints that had almost killed him were finally dead. However, in the next moment, his smile froze. What was Ling Shiqi trying to do? He was actually forcefully becoming a saint. Ling Shiqi, are you crazy? Forcefully becoming a saint will only attract the will of heaven and earth. When that time comes, only death will await you, and you will also implicate us. The 10 heavenly demons roared in horror. Ling Shiqi ignored the 10 heavenly demons, but Tao Ancestor Qinquan said, "Can't you see? Ling Shiqi's goal wasn't the 4 absolute saints from the beginning, but the will of heaven and earth. He did this to attract the will of heaven and earth and then destroy the heavens." Destroy the heavens. The 10 heavenly demons felt that they were hearing things. Qinquan, that kid is crazy. Are you crazy too? 10 heavenly demons, you have been to the underworld before. You should know how mysterious and powerful it is. As the master of the underworld, Ling Shiqi has power that you and I can't imagine. Let's see if he can defy the heavens. Chapter 953. An inexplicable sound suddenly appeared in the sky. Immediately after, everyone who heard the sound felt their consciousness being greatly damaged. Immediately after, no one dared to stay any longer and retreated tens of thousands of miles away as quickly as they could. When they looked up again, they actually had the illusion that the sky seemed to have lowered. It should be said that it was getting lower and lower, as if it was about to press down on the ground. They knew that the sky had descended. Ling Shiqi looked up at the sky. This moment had finally arrived. He had forcefully become a sage and even used the power of destruction in order to draw out the will of the world. Although he had used up all his strength to kill the 3 sages, and his current state was very poor, fighting against people and fighting against the heavens was different. He had prepared more things for the will of the world. An illusory figure appeared in the sky. As soon as he appeared, the world changed color, and thousands of laws returned to him. He was the will of the world. Previously, Ling Shiqi had only seen one of his eyes during the calamity of Heaven Slayer. Now, he had to face the will of the world. The pair of emotionless eyes glanced at Ling Shiqi indifferently. Immediately, an invisible force pressed down, as if it was about to kill Ling Shiqi. Ling Shiqi's expression was stern. Countless threads of different colors flashed around his body. Those were the threads of laws formed by thousands of laws. However, these were not the laws of the central plane, but the laws of the underworld. As the master of the underworld, he could barely use the laws of the underworld even in a different world. Countless threads of laws enveloped Ling Shiqi like a giant net. The power of the will of the world could be immediately discovered as long as it approached. One side of the net of laws immediately collapsed. Ling Shiqi clenched his hand, and a pitch-black energy appeared. When that energy appeared, the will of the world suddenly erupted. The might of the heavens descended and instantly shattered the giant net of laws, as if that black energy was very powerful. In fact, that energy was the origin power of the underworld. This was one of the trump cards Ling Shiqi had prepared for the will of the world. He had taken out his trump card as soon as he came up. In any case, it was either you die or I die. Immediately after, a power that could make all living things submit appeared in the 9 heavens. It was a power that could kill everything. World Force. The will of heaven and earth had actually used the power of the world to suppress the underworld's origin power. Ling Shiqi had already expected this. The underworld's origin power in his hand suddenly spread out, and the boundless netherworld aura behind him manifested everything in the underworld. He projected the world of the underworld into the central elemental plane, using the power of the world to fight against the power of the world. At the same time as the underworld world manifested, another magnificent mountain river painting appeared. Inside the painting were countless living beings. This was none other than the mountain river painting of the falling star continent. Ling Shiqi absorbed all the dragon veins and obtained the power of faith of the world. The will and faith of the people became his weapon against the will of the world. This was Ling Shiqi's strongest attack and his last chance. However, he had miscalculated one thing. The central elemental plane was now in ruins, and the world's origin power had weakened a lot. However, the underworld world had just been born. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if the underworld world and the people of the fallen star continent joined forces, they were still no match for the central elemental plane. The illusion of the underworld world disappeared, and the mountain river painting of the fallen star continent collapsed. Am I going to lose just like that? Ling Shiqi was extremely unwilling. He had used all his trump cards, but it was still not enough. In the end, he still could not defy the heavens. Unless he possessed a power even greater than the underworld's origin energy. Ling Shiqi could not believe it. What power could be stronger than the underworld world? At this moment, he suddenly seemed to have grasped something, and a flash of inspiration appeared in his mind. No, of course there was a power stronger than the underworld world. The underworld world was born out of the system. In the system, the underworld was just a subsidiary territory system. What was stronger than the underworld world was naturally the system. Before deciding to fight Tian Yi, Ling Shiqi had not thought of using the system. Unfortunately, he had searched through the system's store and could not find anything that could defeat the will of the world. Even if there was something, it was not as strong as his own strength. Therefore, he did not intend to use the system. At this moment, he suddenly had some understanding. Why did he have to find something in the system to deal with the will of the world? Was the system not the most powerful power itself? Moreover, his memory suddenly returned to many years ago, when he was still on Blood Mist Island. Not long after he had obtained the system, he had a question. Where did the things that he sold to the system go? Where did the things that the system gave him come from? At that time, he did not find the answer, and no one could give him the answer. But now, he seemed to have found the answer. The will of the world's eyes flashed, and the power of the world returned to nothing, strangling Lang Shichi everywhere. But this time, the power of the world was defeated before it could get close. At this moment, Lang Shichi's body was surging with a strange power. This power did not belong to life, did not belong to death, did not belong to creation, did not belong to destruction, and was not even the power of the world. It was a power that had transcended life and death, and did not belong to any world. It was the system's laws. The system's laws turned into a sharp sword and slashed out. There was no sword skill to speak of, nor was there any power of the laws of the world. It was just an ordinary sword, but for the first time, the will of the world revealed a trace of fear. This sword was a threat to his life. The will of the world also moved for the first time. He waved his right hand, and endless power of the heavens descended. A wave of world power descended, wanting to suppress the sword chi. However, he miscalculated. The sword chi ignored the heavens' power and the power of the world, and shot directly in front of the will of the world. At this moment, the will of the world's body suddenly turned, and narrowly avoided the sword chi. In the blink of an eye, what awaited him was endless sword chi. The sword chi formed by the system's laws. The will of the world spread out his hands, and there was a sense of ceremony. Then, endless power of the world kept gathering, and his body became more and more solid. In the end, he was no different from an ordinary person. He did not use any skills. He held the power of the world in his hands, and was about to kill Lang Shichi. The boundless sword energy and the power of the world kept clashing against each other. There was no sound at all, nor was there any shocking movement. Lang Shichi's sword energy was constantly being melted away, but it was constantly being reborn. Both sides seemed to have reached a stalemate. Lang Shichi's expression became more and more serious. Unfortunately, he comprehended the system's laws too late. If he had comprehended it earlier, he could have at least figured out some other ways to use it, but now it was a little too late. In the process of resisting the will of the world, he was also deducing the system's laws. Right now, he was just a little bit away from comprehending it, and just a little bit away from being able to suppress the will of the world. However, his body was already unable to withstand the pressure of the system's laws and the power of the world. Chapter 954. Just a little bit more, just a little bit more. Lang Shichi's body began to crack, and his soul kept shaking. He could be destroyed at any time. Now, he was just a little bit away from being able to suppress the will of heaven and earth, or even kill it. However, who could help him stall for a little bit of time, or give him a little bit more power? It seemed like no one. Amitabha. At that moment, Master Tu Deng, who was tens of thousands of miles away, suddenly chanted Buddha's name. His expression was solemn as he said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Before anyone could understand why he suddenly said this, Tu Deng made an extremely shocking move. He put his palms together, and Buddhist light shot into the sky. The power of laws weaved into a golden lotus that lifted him up. Behind him, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and Arhats appeared and kowtowed to him. Tu Deng's aura rose to its limit. At that moment, there was a throbbing sound from the 9 heavens. The tribulation clouds arrived instantly. It was the heavenly slayer tribulation. Everyone was shocked. Tu Dang had chosen to transcend the tribulation to become a saint. Was he crazy? They retreated tens of thousands of miles away, afraid of being affected. The 10 sky fiends cried out, "What is this old monk doing? My aura was almost exposed. If the will of heaven and earth detects it, my life will be over." However, the 9-Sun Supreme Sage said, "I see. He wants to transcend the tribulation to disperse the will of heaven and earth's power. After all, as the world's spiritual energy dissipates, the will of heaven and earth will also weaken. It will not allow Ling Shiqi to become a saint, nor will it allow Tu Dang to become a saint. However, its power is limited. By sending down 2 heavenly slayer tribulations at the same time, the pressure on Ling Shiqi will be greatly reduced." Meng Tianzong said solemnly, "Tu Dang is using his life to share some of the pressure on Ling Shiqi." Everyone fell silent. As the saying went, every man for himself. To be able to reach this step, they were all extremely selfish people. Even if they saw Ling Shiqi take on the power of the world by himself and fight against the heavens, the outcome of this battle would have a great impact on them. However, they still chose to watch from the sidelines and observe the situation. And Tuding actually used a suicidal move to help Ling Shiqi. In other words, he was helping them. "Ha ha ha, I understand. The venerable beast suddenly laughed like a madman. Everyone looked at him, wondering why he was going crazy again. He looked in the direction of the Ling Shiqi, his eyes shining with endless fanaticism. "Shifter Emperor, let me do one last thing for you. I've been hiding my whole life, and I've had enough of hiding." After saying that, he actually revealed his true form. Demonic roars shook the sky, and he stretched out a giant arm, as if he wanted to pull down the sky. Following it, the will of the heavens and earth descended as another tribulation of heavenly death appeared. The few people beside him were shocked and angry. One ran faster than the other. "Crazy, another one has gone crazy. Even if you go crazy, don't drag us into it." Ling Shiqi suddenly felt the power of the will of heaven and earth weaken. He scanned with his divine telekinesis and realized that it was Tuding and the venerable beast who risked their lives to trigger the tribulation of heavenly death, taking away a portion of the will of heaven and earth's power. He was originally very close to suppressing the will of heaven and earth. Although no one could give him any more power now, they were using their lives to buy him a chance. Ling Shiqi's system laws suddenly burst forth, weaving into an inescapable net. Strip. The loss of the will of heaven and earth's power was the final straw that broke the camel's back. As the net of laws fell, all of the power of laws in the middle element world within its range was wiped clean, and the will of heaven and earth was visibly weakened. The situation instantly reversed. "You claim to be the master of the world, but I don't come from this world." Ling Shiqi did not give the will of heaven and earth any chance to breathe. The system laws evolved into countless alternate worlds, and traces of world power with different auras continuously gathered. Of course, only world power could defeat world power. Those alternate worlds were the imaginary worlds in Ling Shiqi's mind. At this moment, he actually turned illusions into reality. Ling Shiqi instantly absorbed the world power of the alternate worlds. The middle prime world spontaneously began to reject these foreign powers, but to no avail. Because there were too many alternate worlds. The will of heaven and earth, which had never shown any emotion, actually showed a hint of fear at this moment. Ling Shiqi waved one hand, and the infinite worlds descended, completely suppressing the middle prime world. How could a mere world power resist the infinite world's power? In just an instant, the will of heaven and earth was completely suppressed by the infinite worlds. One wrong step after another. Because the will of heaven and earth lost a portion of its power, Ling Shiqi seized the opportunity to kill it in one blow. The will of heaven and earth that looked down on all living beings in the world was finally killed by someone. Speaking of which, it was a kind of irony. After the will of heaven and earth dissipated, only a ball of golden light was left in the air. Ling Shiqi could feel the world's origin energy from this ball of light. It was just like the underworld's origin energy, but much stronger. He knew that as long as he refined this origin energy, he could become the will of heaven and earth of heaven and earth. When this world returned to chaos and was reborn, he would be the master of heaven and earth. But he did not refine the world's origin energy, but kept it first. When his figure appeared from the 9 heavens, anyone who saw this scene knew that the middle prime world's sky had changed. For the next tens of thousands of years, the middle prime world would be ruled by this person. Ling Shiqi did not care about the gazes of others. He turned to look at Tooting and the venerable beast. Because the will of heaven and earth had fallen, the two's heavenly slayer tribulations had naturally dissipated. Tooting was very strong, and the dharma he cultivated was not of the middle prime world, so he only suffered some light injuries. On the other hand, the venerable beast was a little worse off. At this moment, his towering body was covered in wounds, and blood flowed like a river. Fortunately, he still had his breath. Ling Shiqi shot out a brilliant green light, and rich vitality enveloped the venerable beast, quickly healing his wounds. If not for Tooting and the venerable beast's heavenly slayer tribulations, he might not have had the chance to kill the will of heaven and earth. Words cannot express my gratitude. I will remember your kindness in my heart. Unexpectedly, the two shook their heads, and the venerable beast said sincerely, "It is my honor to be able to die for the Yao Emperor." Tooting chanted a Buddhist mantra, "Almsgiver, you should focus on healing your wounds." The power of 10,000 realms was not something that could be easily withstood. Although Ling Shiqi had won this battle, his body was covered in cracks. Even the blood in his body had been burned to nothing. If not for his incredible physical strength, he would have died long ago, along with the will of heaven and earth. "Yao Emperor, you are injured." The venerable beast was shocked at first, then he stood vigilantly beside Ling Shiqi. Although the will of heaven and earth was dead, Ling Shiqi was also seriously injured, and it was not safe at this time. The 9 Suns Supreme Sage and the 10 heavenly demons came one after another. They originally thought that once the will of heaven and earth dissipated, they would be able to return to the Saint Plane, but after several attempts, they still could not do so. Tooting, the venerable beast, and Meng Tianzong stood in front of Ling Shiqi. "Ling Shiqi, we lent you our saint power. Now that the will of heaven and earth has fallen, why can't we sense the Saint Plane?" The 10 heavenly demons questioned. Ling Shiqi knew their purpose, and he said, "Don't waste your time. The spiritual power of this world is no longer able to give birth to saint spirit masters. However, you still have your saint souls. Once the spiritual power reappears, you will be able to return to the Saint Plane." "Really? I won't lie to you. Being able to kill the will of heaven and earth is also due to your contributions, but you need to understand one thing." At this point, Ling Shiqi's eyes were cold, and a surge of heavenly power descended, causing them to tremble in fear. "The heavens cannot be doubted." These words exploded in their ears like thunder, and it caused their saint souls to tremble violently, almost collapsing. At this moment, they finally understood that standing in front of them was not the Ling Shiqi of the past, but a new heavens. Chapter 955. He had finally finished writing the book. I started writing in September 2019 and finished in September 2021. It took me 3 years. He had spent 3 years to write a book that barely had 2 million words. It was truly embarrassing. The author also used his spare time to write. At first, he saved 100,000 manuscripts and published it with the attitude of giving it a try. I was signed after 2 chapters, which gave me great motivation. When there was an epidemic, I had nothing to do at home, so I could write several chapters almost every day. I also capriciously published several times, so I didn't have many manuscripts left. After going to work normally, there was a lot of work backlog. Every day was very tiring, and the writing state was also very bad. It was difficult to maintain the standard of 2 chapters a day. So the book became 1 chapter a day. What moved me was that some readers expressed their understanding. And I want to say sorry, this book was unfinished for a while. The end of May was the busiest time of the year for the author. I really didn't have the time and energy to write a book. At most, I could occasionally think about the next plot. Fortunately, this book was finally finished. I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief because this was a long-time dream of mine. I had written some novels since high school, but none of them stuck, and none of them were published. It wasn't until my job was stable that I made up my mind to fulfill this childhood dream. However, more than 10 years had passed. The book's results weren't good. It could even be said that it was a complete failure, but I still survived. I have to thank the readers who have always supported me. Every time I wanted to give up, they kept encouraging me. Naturally, there were a lot of regrets in the book. The last 100,000 words should have been more than 500,000 words of content. A lot of the specific plot was simplified, resulting in some characters not being established. Fortunately, the holes dug were basically filled. Regrets weren't necessarily a bad thing. In life, it was impossible to do everything perfectly. Just like the Leng Shiqi in the book, even if he transcended this world, there were still hidden dangers and regrets. Only with regrets would there be motivation and desire to continue. When I typed the words, "The book is finished," I suddenly understood the mentality of the ancient scholars. This book had tens of thousands of collections. In this world, so many people had read my work. Even if one day I was no longer here, I would more or less leave a trace in this world. Thinking about it, it was quite good. I will continue to write the book, but I won't easily publish it again. Work was getting busier and busier, and there were more and more trivial things to do at home. I could only squeeze out some spare time to write. Without the pressure of updating, perhaps my inspiration would be richer. The structure of this book has some ideas. This time, I won't care too much about the results. At the very least, I will save millions of words before I publish it. Alright, fellow Taoists, let's meet again if fate allows. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.